just continuing related to program forms, this just kind of depicts a little bit of how a program structure would be different than a functional structure. As you can kind of see, the program of services provided, like medical surgical, has all the different disciplines under one service line leader instead of a nursing division head, so to speak. So there's some benefits to this because you have a very multidisciplinary approach, and it really uses experts in a specific line that would be really good for really concentrating perhaps on medical surgical services as a whole. Disadvantages, though, are difficulty coordinating services amongst programs. So clearly nursing in med-surg, nursing in emergency, and nursing in outpatient clinics might have some very commonality type rules, policies, standards, etc., or evidence-based practice that they all should be doing. But those things might not all be similar. And so the way we look at it from a nursing discipline standpoint, there is a potential for either duplication of resources over and over again, people doing the same work in their different service lines, or there's also the problem of not standardized patient care across the system, which can be an accreditation issue as well. So you also see some things called parallel form. This just is where you have a typical kind of, say, a functional department, one that we already looked at. But in addition to that functional department, you also have these parallel type committees, task force, different things that people work on, or standing committees, and that has been pretty common in hospitals, to where they have a pharmacy and therapeutics committee, for example, and that's a standing committee, and it involves nursing and physicians and pharmacy and whoever else they think that would be appropriate to be on that, maybe the quality department. So you have functional representatives who sit on these standing committees or task forces, and in those you get this cross-knowledge work done between the functions, and so that's a positive thing. And so most of the time you're going to see a mix between some of these different structures, but having these as a sideline thing that's not on an org chart is very common. There's also something called a modified program form, and it is kind of like the program form that we just talked about up here. It actually, in addition to that, is going to have sort of a sideline way of offsetting the fragmentation between those functions. You know how we talked about, well, you got nursing in all these different areas, but they're not talking to each other. One of the major drawbacks that sometimes occurs with this, though, is nurse managers that are in those different service lines, they may not have much nursing authority. They may not even have any control of operations, finances, or personnel issues at all. They may just be purely focused on managing their workforce in terms of the care at the bedside, and somebody administratively does all the other stuff. So they may not ever develop as a broad-based leader in those kind of things, and there's pros and cons to that on either side. There's also a organizational chart that's for more complex organizations, but it is getting more and more common. You see this a lot these days, and it's where you have a matrix. And so besides reporting directly to the nursing division head, You may also have a direct line of communication for your department to the program line. And so that kind of pulls it all together, very organized, and it makes it very good because it's functional on both sides. It may have people really working between function and service line very well, but the only drawback is it can be also kind of costly because you have to have specialists kind of handling both sides of that coin. And occasionally people find this a little complicated in terms of who do we really report to when it's a final decision has to be made. There can be some conflict there as well. So you're going to see organizational charts like we've just depicted, and Keith, usually these are going to be a visual display. Some of these are very large and aren't on a piece of paper. They may be on an electronic format that you can view. Things to know about the actual way it looks on there. If they have a direct solid line from one box to another, then that is a flow of authority. So that means that department or that position reports to the one above it, and or down the line. That is a line and flow of authority, and that's important for nurses to know because you guys, when we talk about legal issues and care issues later on in the semester, we have what's called a duty to report, and you have to make sure that when you are reporting up the chain of command that you include every entity up that chain of command with a legal problem to cover yourself according to the way the Board of Nursing considers that. So it's very important to kind of know what that direct line of authority is. You'll also see on the org chart some dotted lines to some positions or areas, and that might be something like maybe staff development is a good example, where they have like a dotted line to the nurse managers or to the nursing director, and that's because the nursing director is getting consultative information from that particular department, and that doesn't mean that department can order somebody to do something. It just means that it's kind of a flow of information to assist that department. And then you are going to see some informal structures that you can't find on an org chart itself. These are just two depictions of span of control. You can kind of see the one on the top. The president of the organization has 3 different vice presidents. So although they may have large departments and many personnel under them, they really have 3 people to really manage in terms of personnel. If you look at the span of control below, you see an administrator, and this administrator has 4 different areas or people that they're managing. And the nursing and allied health people actually have frontline managers that are for 6 different units, and then lots of care providers under them. Much of the literature would suggest that you should not have a huge span of control. Some literature will say no more than 5 people to manage under you. Other ones will go up as high as 10 or 15. But the more people that you have to interact with and oversee, the less quality that you can be in terms of directing, coaching, and oversight. So the more flat the organization, the more you may have to break some of these entities down so that there are sensible breakdowns, but also not so many things or entities to control that you can't do a good job in the oversight part. There are a lot of implications for leaders and management in nursing. You may hear terms like restructuring or re-engineering. Those really deal with the need to change the organizational structure because we just have a new philosophy of how we want to go about something. We've had loss of revenue in a particular area, and there's no need to have that many departments. We can downsize some and put some stuff together and restructure. The other thing is there may be the need to re-engineer a specific, whether that be a brand new division or a brand new function, because there is actually a new kind of service line. A good example of that would be something like telehealth. Does telehealth be like a section under technology? Or if it's a service line, it may need its own re-engineered division to set up to do some more increased service in that area. And so just to give you some examples of some things that might be done for that. Anymore, you have nursing folks that really, in terms of staff, really want to have transparency in what goes on with decision making. They prefer a participative approach in their leaders. They also want nursing leaders to be transformational and more innovative, like we've already talked about. There is huge amounts of work for interdisciplinary work, and not everybody has had expertise in that. Just coming into the nursing workforce, and other disciplines have that issue as well. And a nursing leader or manager is often really responsible for staying ahead and looking at what are the opportunities for reassessing and reevaluating and changing the organizational structure to meet the needs that we have upcoming. These are just a huge long list of issues and trends that have an impact on some of those things that leaders in nursing have to think about. You've seen here at the school a focus on interprofessional education, and that kind of goes along with a lot of the interdisciplinary work that's now required, because there's we work and learn in education when we're getting trained in our professions all separate, and then we throw us together in the workplace, and we're not prepared going in to know how to do some of this interdisciplinary work. So that's just one example. We know that the nursing shortage has a huge impact on what would a structure or a setup for an organization be, or job positions or descriptions, if nurses need to have more support or some different type of roles created that do some of the nursing workforce work, if there's not enough registered nurses to do it. You'll see these terms centralization versus decentralization in terms of decision making, and committee work as well. You can have centralization where decisions are made at the top level, or decentralization where decision making is done throughout the organization in like committee structures reporting back up. Shared governance is a very integral term that is in universities, and it is also well entrenched these days in nursing departments. It was introduced in the 1970s and adapted by healthcare organizations in the 1980s, and it's kind of the hallmark of a kind of model for how magnet organizations operate. It is based on shared accountability and staff nurses being empowered through autonomy and accountability to help have more of a decentralized management structure and be empowered to make decisions more autonomously and with the support of their leadership. It also may include other disciplines as well as patients and families in decision as part of that decentralization as well. The implications for nursing is it's very time consuming. It takes a long time to get an effective team that can make decisions, but you have to be able to do all of these entities that are listed here in terms of really making sure that it unfolds well and takes place adequately to set the stage for this continuous learning environment and coaching that is ongoing to kind of help people understand they're supposed to help make decisions, not be the victims of what else goes on. This is just some different tenets that come out of that kind of best practice model. And again, interprofessional education and collaboration is a huge thing that's on our radar, and you'll see more and more about that in your career. And then really just